recording. I'm with Brene Lloyd of Northwatch, and we are talking about the Ontario Nuclear Commission.
The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission hearing of the Darlington relicensing.
And what are the issues there?
Next Monday to Thursday of next week, December 3rd to 6th, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission is convening a hearing in municipality of Clarington in Durham region for 3 different matters related to the continued operation and the proposed refurbishment, rebuilding of the Darlington Nuclear Generating Station. This is unprecedented, really. The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, which is the national regulator of nuclear facilities in Canada, they have combined the relicensing for the waste management facility, which is where all of the high-level nuclear fuel waste is stored, the relicensing of the Darlington reactor, and a proposal to refurbish, basically to rebuild from the inside out, the currently operating reactors at Darlington. They've combined all of those into a single hearing, and they're holding that hearing next week in Durham region. It was originally scheduled for November, but there was such a strong public response. There are 90 interveners presenting, and at least an equal amount have put in written submissions. And because of that, they had to reschedule the hearings from November to December. And so those three issues are all being held. Anyone intervening has a total of 10 minutes to speak to all 3 of those issues. Each of these issues are very large in each of themselves.
And well, your expertise is in waste management, which would be a big concern for Straight Goods audience. Can you talk a little about the current situation?
I work with Northwatch, which is a regional organization in Northern Ontario, and we have for several decades worked on the issue of nuclear waste, and particularly high-level nuclear waste, the fuel waste that comes out of the reactors, or the irradiated fuel bundles. And the situation we have right now, of course, one of the issues with any proposals to rebuild or construct additional reactors or extend the life of the operating reactors is, what that really means is increasing the volume of highly radioactive nuclear fuel waste and other wastes that are produced by the reactor during operation with each additional month or year of operation. So we work primarily around waste issues, but certainly the reactor operation is a concern because that generating of electricity using nuclear power gives you really the fleeting benefit of electricity, but it gives you the very long-lasting legacy of having a highly radioactive waste that must be isolated from the environment into perpetuity. The waste is radioactive and hazardous for hundreds of thousands of years. So we might as well just round that off and say it's forever.
Well, what do they do with the waste now?
Well, right now the waste is rather imperfectly stored at the reactor station. There are different proposals, plans, the industry would say, for the burial of the waste. So there's 2 different schemes right now at play. One is a scheme by Ontario Power Generation to bury the low and so-called intermediate level radioactive waste. Those are the operating waste, but also the refurbishment waste from the operating reactors. And Ontario Power Generation has a proposal that's actually going through a federal review right now to bury those wastes on the shore of Lake Huron, deep below the surface of the Bruce Nuclear Generating Station in limestone. That's one scheme. There's another scheme that Ontario Power Generation has majority control of through the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. This is an association of the provincial utilities who produce electricity using nuclear power. So it's Ontario Power Generation, Hydro-Quebec, New Brunswick Power. And they have a proposal to bury the highly radioactive nuclear fuel waste in a rock formation deep below the surface somewhere. For decades, the idea was to find some perfect pluton, some large intact rock formation in the Canadian Shield. In 2005, the Nuclear Waste Management Organization released a plan that expanded that site search. So really any rock will do. They expanded their criteria or category of potential rock formations to include the sedimentary rocks of southern Ontario.
And how are they presenting this to communities? How are they looking for their new site?
They call it a national infrastructure project. So in 2005, they submitted a plan to the federal government calling it adaptive phase management, and they market it to the communities calling it a national infrastructure project, always mentioning the $16 to $24 billion price tag attached. Now that $16 to $24 billion, that's the cost if you run those numbers out 300 years from now, which is the length of the project. This is a 300-year project. In 300 years, they say, the community that is sited with this underground burial project will make the decision on whether or not to close that underground repository, that underground disposal or burial site. So the $16 to $24 billion in current dollars would be about $6 billion, and that includes many, many dollars which will never see the light of day in any community that is selected for the burial. So right now there's 21 communities. This is quite an astonishing time we find ourselves in. 21 communities have agreed to allow themselves to be studied as possible burial sites. The marketing of this project was done through the municipal associations and the economic development committees. Every community that has added themselves to the list has added themselves to that list without the knowledge of the local community. It's been a decision of council. In some cases, I wouldn't even call it a decision of council. There's at least one community that was added into the study process but on the weight of an email from the clerk. So a committee of council met, said to the clerk, we should learn more about this. He sent an email off, and presto, they're in the Nuclear Waste Management Organization's Learn More program, capital L, capital M, which includes a screening study, a number of open houses. NWMO starts coming to town, sets up their displays in the municipal office, in the arena, in the library.
And what is it that they're not telling the people?
Well, they're not telling the people a great number of things. They're not really disclosing the very, very hazardous nature of this material. They take the edge off of any really hard facts. So, for example, half-life is the amount of time it takes for a radionuclide or a radioactive isotope to move from one point to the next in the decay chain. That's called the half-life. It reduces its radioactivity in half over that time. Well, the industry presents this really as a good news story. Well, they say because these materials have a half-life, they will reduce themselves in radioactivity over time. What they don't say is that in that they're releasing radiation, which is the very cause of concern. That's what we're concerned about, is the radiation. And the